Hi, my name is Terhi and I'm a second year PhD student based here at the University of Southampton. Rather than an archaeologist, I'm actually a web scientist, and I'm based at the Web Science Doctoral Training Centre, and my research is funded by the Digital Economy Research Council's UK. As a web scientist, I look at the ways in which the web can affect the way that we access data, and in my case this is ancient Assyrian data. Today's talk was going to have a quick introduction to the web side of things in terms of my research, and then I'm going to show you some examples of the types of instances of geographical data that we know from ancient Mesopotamia, including mentions of places and features in literature and in some cartographical representations as well. And I'm just going to finish off my talk with a quick outline of the situation with the ancient city of Akka. So my research, in terms of the web side of things, examines the potential of linked open data, of the semantic web and knowledge representation. Specifically, I have been looking at linked open data as a publication paradigm for ancient world data and how this data could be published in a machine-readable format. So what is linked open data? Well, it's really more of a how, not a what. It's a way of doing things. It's a way of publishing raw data online in such a way that search engines, for example, can identify and differentiate between different resources. So this may include things like identifying that several websites are talking about the same thing, or being able to tell apart between two synonymous or homographic words to filter out spam and so forth. And what makes it interesting for me is that we can use linked open data to bring together information on the same thing, such as a geographical location, but from a number of different unconnected data streams. And in that way, we stand to enrich our knowledge about a given topic in new and unforeseeable ways. Okay, so sounds good, but why do this? I mean, why do this when we already have multi-institutional relational databases that bring together the collections of numerous different institutions? Assyriology has a couple of great examples of this, such as the CDLI, or the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative. It brings together the collections of over 20 different museums and universities. Well, I would say that there are a few clear motivators as to why we should adopt linked data as a publication paradigm. On a generic, sort of abstract academic level, this is certainly a challenge with diverse and incomplete data sets. But on a more pragmatic level, interlinking between resources will make your data easier to find, it will make your site more visible in search results, and it's going to increase visitor traffic to your site, which will result in better web statistics. And of course, it's the fundamental importance of your data is being enriched by further knowledge from external data sets. And anyway, Google's already using these technologies in things like knowledge graph. So really, I wouldn't be studying this if I didn't personally think that this is something that, if I thought that this is something that might happen. Rather, I think we should consider things, how are we going to make this happen, rather than whether we're going to make this happen, and what existing tools are there already that will help us to do fairly complicated things in relatively simple steps. So for linked data, as I already mentioned, my speciality lies in looking at Assyriological data. So my other topic is that of ancient Mesopotamia. My research focuses on the data, the language, cultures of what is modern-day Iraq. It's ancient Mesopotamia, it's the land between the rivers, it's the plateau nestled between the Tigris and the Euphrates. The literary content and the archaeological record from the area span several thousand years. My area of focus has been the changeover from the 3rd to the 2nd millennium BC, but in today's presentation I'm going to show you examples from various temporal and socio-cultural contexts throughout the history of Mesopotamia. So there are some 500,000 objects that are known, scattered across collections and museums across the world that carry this distinctive cuneiform script. And these records contain a great number of different types of texts. So we have tax records and sales receipts, administrative documents, but at the same time there are love letters, there are marriage documents, there are shopping lists. We know poems, we know songs, we know lamentations, we know endless lists of proverbs. We have instances of omens, of astronomical observations, medical texts, political propaganda. And in terms of literary genres, there's plenty different ones. We've got historical compositions to mythical narratives and even wisdom literature. And all these inscriptions mention several places and geographical features. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the big picture and then I'm going to hone in on the smaller details. So here is an example of a proverb and then a quote from a piece of a mythical narrative. And these are both Sumerian examples, and they talk of cities but also of the surrounding areas in the context, as is often the case, is of enemy or neighboring states. In the proverb above here, the donkey of Ashan, the bear of Marhashi, these are probably symbolic of the nations or the rulers or the cultures of those areas. But the geographical places themselves, in this case Anshan, Marhashi and Melucha, these are well attested in other types of documents as well. And for some of them we have a fairly certain knowledge of where they might exist in the real world. Anshan, for example, is thought to be in Elam, which is modern-day Iran. Sumerian texts often refer to these three locations in the lower quote here of Magan, Dilmun, and Melucha. And Magan is pretty much identified as being Oman, and Dilmun, although we're not entirely sure, is probably Bahrain or the eastern provinces of Saudi Arabia. It could be Oman, or it could be some location on the Iranian coast of the Persian Gulf. Melucha, however, is a really hotly debated topic, and there are scholars who suggest that Melucha might be as far afield as modern-day Pakistan, and that these mentions of the Melucha cultures are referring to the Harappan civilization. These are really based on evidence for extensive trade networks between these two locations. And this is a Babylonian view of the world. The British Museum has one of the oldest existing geographical maps, which is this one here. It's of late Babylonian origin, so it's mid-first millennium BC. As you can see, the tablet itself may be not so clear, but the drawing next to it should illustrate it quite nicely, that you have two sort of circular lines which represent water. In this case it's labeled the ocean. The city of Babylon here is found in the center of the map and thus the center of the known world. And also we have the southern marshes, mountains and islands, and also the 7 small interior circles, which appear to represent 7 different cities. We've also got fairly generic instances of mountain and of city, and here I'd like to draw your attention here to canal. Canals is something I'm going to talk about momentarily. They were hugely important to the ancient Mesopotamians. So on a sort of more honed-in scale of things, the inscriptions often have mentions of cities and even parts of cities. There are very strong affiliations between individuals and the cities that they originate from, or even parts of the cities. And parts of cities would have individually named temples within them, and temple complexes would be given their own names. Citizens and affiliations are often filial in terminology, so you have people describe themselves as the sons of Babylon, the sons of Nippur, the sons of Adab. And this here is a quote from a piece known as Victory of Utu-Hagal, and this is considered a historical account. And we can identify several places and parts of cities. So we have Unuk, and we've got Kulaba, which is a specific temple precinct within Unuk. It's dedicated to the god An, and actually this part of the city district is renamed later on in history, so it's even helping us to place this on a timeline. And what I think is really, really interesting is that from these type of inscriptions we can see some of the most tantalizing bits of information, the type of information that I would like to see being tested for explicit statements and implicit referencing, which is this distance that it has taken them to travel between two locations. So, for example, we have the shrine at Ilitape, and a day later they arrive, or they set up camp at Karkara. So, can we determine where these sites are based on these descriptions in the inscriptions themselves? And could we use this information to identify the exact locations on the map and perhaps use this to map the ancient Near East? And in terms of cities and map representations of cities, I have an example here, which is of Nippur. To show the other side. There you go. In this one, you can see quite clearly the map includes the temple and temple precinct and the city wall, but it also shows the Euphrates and the canal that was used to divert water from the river into the city. And Nippur in current day exists in the middle of the desert, so it's quite interesting to see that at least some point it seems that the city was built onto the banks of the Euphrates. And back to the issue of the importance of canals. This is very clear from the written record. This is a quote from a royal inscription, which is called Urnamat the Canal Digger. So Urnamat the king has given himself that additional title of canal digger. And as you can see, canals were often given personal names, and these also appear in maps, which I'll show you in just a bit. What I think is really exciting is that these individually named canals could then be used as anchoring points between, say, descriptions and maps. We know that the same canal with the same name in the same city must be in one given place. So, besides these literary compositions and proverbs and things, we also have administrative records and tax records that provide detailed descriptions of the arable land and include the names of things like fields and canals. So records like this can be used to outline the size and shape of individual fields. A number of field plans are known, and most of which do come with outlines of measurements. These tend to be predominantly tetrahedral shapes. Triangular examples such as this one are quite unusual. And this actually highlights one of the problems, that we need to be very concerned about the type of data that we include in our mapping processes, because this is known as MS1938/2, is actually argued to be a scholarly piece. It's a mathematical assignment by a school student rather than an actual record of a genuine farm plot. Nevertheless, in the case of genuine field records, we can date records to the same year, so we maybe can make some kind of deductions from it. Usually field sizes are measured by the yield of the crop rather than the size of the field. But if we assume that environmental conditions, sort of sunlight and rain and so forth, for two fields in relative proximity are the same, then perhaps we can induce that or infer that a field that has the yield that's twice the size of the other one would also geographically be twice as large. But research of this type is really one of these ones where a seriological data needs to be supported by data from other streams, other data streams such as data regarding soil salinity or temperature fluctuations in antiquity and so forth. And this kind of evidence is really, I feel like, a strong supporting case for linked data. And finally, just to refer to the final city that I promised, in some instances, sites and places are only known from textual references. And perhaps in a way most staggering of these is Akkade, which is the capital of an entire empire. An ancient document describes the city as the capital city of King Sargon and the seat of power of the Akkadian Empire. And this is around 2300, 2200 BC. But even beyond this, from the 21st all the way to the 7th century BC, all Sumerian kings and Babylonian kings used the title King of Sumer and Akkad. So Akkad was clearly a big deal, and Akkad was the capital city of this empire. But yet, the actual physical archaeological site has never been located on the ground. It definitely appears in lots of compositions, and suggestions for locations have been made. It's been suggested perhaps that it is situated opposite Sippar on the left bank of the Euphrates, or it might be beneath modern-day Baghdad, or it could be in the upper part of the southern plain of the Mesopotamian plateau, or it could be some large unexplored mound, or it could lay near the confluence of the Tigris and the Diyala. What we know is the first known mention of the city of Akkad is an inscription which predates even Sargon by a good long while. And what we have is an inscription by Enshakushana of Uruk, where he claims to have defeated Akkad, which tells us really that the city was already in existence, but it was already a force to be reckoned with, and that the conquest over it was something worth bragging about. And this is, as I say, a great deal before the days of Sargon. So it's possible that an urban centre existed for quite a long period of time, sort of changed function as time passed. It's also fairly certain that the city remained, at least in some kind of size, long after the collapse of the Akkadian Empire, probably as late as the Hellenistic period, which was about 3rd century BC. But it just never was as politically significant later on. So these are the type of examples where I really think link open data can help us, because in the representation of the content of the literary and the administrative records and everything else that we know, perhaps we can deduce the physical location of such a big city and help us really hone in on the type of research that we can do. And also mapping the content will help us, mapping the content from different literary inscriptions will help us pinpoint areas for archaeological excavation and prevent us from, for instance, random stabbing in the dark. And that's it. Thank you very much.